I'm Kelsey Moser, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel, where no sandbagging goes unscrutinized.
Esports has a number of amazing women. Journalists, commentators, analysts, interviewers, hosts, people who are either at the very pinnacle of their field or around that level. But I want to make this initial point before I get into the meat of the video, which is when I speak about these particular individuals, and I speak about them as individuals, you will very rarely hear me bring up the very fact of they are women, they are female. That's because, first of all, I don't view the world through what I would consider a sexist lens like that, where you're divisive and you view like, well, you're a man, you're good for a girl or a woman. It's like, I don't view it that way personally. Secondly, these are individuals. So again, I don't judge them by an identity group or by some very simplistic but incredibly broad category that actually is so broad, it not only encapsulates them, but dozens, hundreds of thousands of millions of people who are nothing like them and actually have nothing to do with them except basic biological sex differences that they share, contrasted to other sexes that might exist. But in the context of this video, this is a topic that is brought up again and again, specifically, sometimes internally in esports journalism, but especially as a narrative outside of esports by outside journalists who come in and attempt to farm clicks and outrage by suggesting that esports is sexist. I've shown that it's actually one of the most equal and neutral sports to ever exist in the history of human civilization. But when they do this, since they frame it as women, female, they make it all about the sexes and division in that sense, it's worth pointing this out and drawing attention to the amazing women because they actually show the hypocrisy of those very journalists. These are outside journalists, or they're journalists who exist within esports and haven't been around very long and are just using this as sort of an activist platform to push their own agenda, their own ideology, and get basically what they want for them and people who happen to, again, just share very basic biological similarities to them. Typically, these outside journalists that come in don't know the games they're talking about. They don't have a grounding in these games. They haven't shown themselves to be a fan of the games, who actually enjoys the game and what makes the game good. And yet they're then judging and making all these incredibly final judgments and trying to explain why something is the case without knowing the context. They don't know the people in question. Not only do they not know the competitors in esports, the people who run the industry, who are the ones that by implication they're implying are sexist and keeping women down or out or oppressing them. But more importantly, they don't know the women in question that have succeeded in esports. Because if they did, except for the fact that they don't really care and they're here to push an agenda anyway, they would know that it can't be the case that this kind of sexism exists in the manner that they suggest. These people come in, they make the entire topic not about what a certain woman's doing that's amazing, what a certain man's doing that's amazing, as individuals. That's how I treat people generally. They make it all about sex and gender, about oppression narratives. These are activists pushing an ideology or cynical hacks farming for clicks with low effort material. Whichever one you pick, it's a sad state of affairs. Because when you actually look at some of the amazing women who work in the esports field, you'll find that you don't even have to get into any sort of idea of are women able to compete in these areas here? Are they able to actually get to the top? I don't know as pro players whether women can be top players. That's not yet to be shown. There's a very small amount of people who play. But in terms of all the fields outside of the game, where the game already involves reflexes and other aspects that could be biologically based, I don't know. You'd have to get a scientist to really do a lot of research into that. Look at some of the women we have in esports. So Emily Rand, this is a journalist who works for ESPN. She works in Overwatch. She works in League of Legends. This is someone who, if I had a vote, and I do, for Journalist of the Year 2018, I would give my vote to her. She is one of the hardest working journalists we've ever had. She has immersed herself deeply in both these games, particularly League of Legends, a game that logistically feels almost impossible to be a true expert in because there's so many regions. The entire globe plays it, that to actually have a really strong grounding in all the regions is unreal. And she has the closest I've ever seen. Her and Kelsey have gotten the closest to a full grounding in all the major regions I've ever seen. It's unbelievable. She can do written pieces that are very good. She started to do interviews. She's improving in that area. She's doing talk shows now. She's even developed a sense of humor. She's got a little bit of playfulness to it. It's more enjoyable to watch. This is someone who's doing it all at the moment, doing it all at a very high level, is number one in her field, and it's not number one for a woman, or because, well, we have to let like 20% of women in the field to show we're not sexist and be inclusive. No, she just came into a field that had nothing to do with sex or gender, killed it, did an amazing job, improved, constantly, incredibly productive as well, put out work over and over again, doing research all the time. Someone who, quite frankly, who sacrificed a lot of their life to be this good, just like a male CEO might in a company. And someone comes along and goes, is he just there because he's a man? Like, that's a sexist perspective itself. If I had my vote, she would be the Journalist of the Year. So let's start there, shall we? Another journalist, another one that I work with quite frequently, Kelsey Moser. Sure, she hasn't been a journalist as much this year because she was working as an analyst for H2K. And so as a result, she herself feels as though she's been like precluded from being a journalist, so she shouldn't win an award this year. I can sort of see that. She hasn't done as much. She used to be a very productive person. But you go back to 3 years before, this is someone putting in serious fucking hours. She might, along with Emily Rand, of all people outside of the game, I'm including commentators, like analysts, she might have put in the most raw hours watching VODs, going back and studying VODs, talking to players, trying to figure out the game, incredibly in-depth level of understanding of the game, knowledge of the scene, has her own philosophy on the game, has done some of the best written pieces we've ever seen in the history of esports, not just League of Legends. I think for the last year, she would be my vote for Esports Journalist of the Year. I thought it was actually a shame she didn't win in that particular sense. Now, I have to preclude myself there. I'm not going to vote for myself as Esports Journalist of the Year. I did win the award. Other people voted for me. Fair enough. I also do have a bigger profile, though. I mean, an idiot might spin that as, see, sexism even you say shit. Doesn't work that way. And by the way, I didn't win for all the decade before where I was clear number one in the fucking world. Then you've got someone like Shox. Shox is one of the very best hosts we have in all of esports. And it has fuck all to do with her being a woman, because plenty of men do the hosting gig as well. Red Eye, Machine. Some of these guys are fantastic at the job. Pocket, some of my favourites. She's as good as any of them. That's not an exaggeration. She is a veteran. She's done it for many, many years now at a very high level. She's someone who's very intelligent outside of the game in her own way. She has multiple degrees in different subjects, a kind of educational background and foundation that most people in gaming do not have. Most of those who are even successful are self-made, and we had to come up usually through hard times in life and start from the very bottom of society and work our ways up. This is someone who actually has like the pedigree, could probably go and do many other things in the world, could have a very successful career elsewhere. She's chosen to work in the field of esports. She's been one of the best, not just recently, for years and years, going back including to the period when they would claim, they needed to have this diversity stuff to raise women up, etc. She's fluent in numerous languages. She has a fantastic ability to engage with players emotionally and draw things out of them that they might not from another host. One of the very best we've got. I've left to last probably my favourite in terms of like, I'd say Kelsey's my favourite in terms of like, I relate to her more. I think her story's actually a very inspirational one. I'll probably do something where I explain that to you guys one day. I admire a lot of the qualities that I myself have engendered, like hard work, discipline, finding your own perspective. But I want to give probably, I think, the best example of an amazing woman who has succeeded in esports, not because of like bullshit inclusivity and diversity and stuff. At times, yes, this person actually has faced some pushback. She's faced a little bit of discrimination at times on an individual basis, not a systemic basis. And that's got to be Frostgorin. Because what makes Frostgorin so unique? I mean, Kelsey and Emily are very unique in as much as they're in the field of journalism and they become the best and even become the best experts. But in Frostgorin's position as on-camera talent, as someone who's going to appear on the camera, usually you'd only be doing that role if you were perhaps at best in the Shox role. You're the host and you facilitate the conversation and you're very pleasant. And you have a very nice atmosphere that you create and you look very nice and therefore it's very pleasant to watch the thing. Usually that would be the setting that you would shoehorn women in many other industries. In the NFL, in the NBA. Sideline reporter, you'd be the guy who'd say, what did you think about the game? You'd be the person. That's about the best you could get to. Maybe you could be the host of a show, like you see on some of those like First Take, Undisputed. They have female hosts there. Admittedly, they don't get to talk a lot. They don't really suggest much. They tend to just sit there, but that's American television for you. One of the amazing things about Frostgorin is she is not just one of the best commentators and analysts in all of esports. Not just League of Legends. In League of Legends, she might be number one. In all of esports. Mother, I fucking told you she would always get to number one in League of Legends. She's not only one of the best in all of esports, but she does it from the expert color analyst / commentator role. Now, that is not just rare for women. It is practically unheard of in sports in general. You go and watch an NFL game for the Super Bowl. Do you hear a woman as the colour commentator? You go watch the NBA Finals. Are you hearing a woman commentate the games? No. The glass ceiling in those games is significantly higher. Now, admittedly, a lot of people are competing for that. Perhaps not as many women. I don't know the circumstances of those games. I'm not making any sort of like claim against them. I'm pointing out how far ahead esports is in this sense and how clearly there isn't the same types of problems and you can break through based on merit if you are really that good. So this is someone where one of the reasons why she faced sexism in her career is some people did have the mindset of that sort of a role, you know, like being authoritative and being the guy who explains the way it should be in the correct way. That's better left for men. Men should be the experts there. You can join in. You can maybe like talk to the man and agree with what he says, or say like, oh yeah, well, we're going to talk about something else now. No, she came in and she was doing that role, and she did it as good as any of the men out there. She pushed through that ceiling. And by the way, at the time, she did it without complaining publicly. She took all the hits. She took all the criticism. Yes, there's been a slip recently, which isn't really the end of the world. You know, we'll get past that as a fucking community. Still fantastic at a job, still killing it at Worlds. This is someone who generally did it the right way, did it in an amazing way. What a great inspirational, I hate the term role model because you shouldn't be forced to be a role model. But if you were a young woman coming into the industry and you were someone who says, listen, I actually am really interested in like the strategy of the game. I want to know the game in depth. She's the person to look at if you want to be an on-camera talent. If you want to be a journalist, look at Kelsey Moser, look at Emily Rand. If you want to be a host, look at Shocks. These people are fantastic examples that if you want to be inspired, they've got all the inspiration you need right there, mate. Just look at what they've done with their careers. How they've done it generally without being people who whined and made themselves seem like victims and played into these bullshit media narratives that are being spun all the time by people who don't even know the game or don't care to because they're doing it in a cynical manner, pushing their agenda. She's someone also, by the way, who has a specialist skill set. Again, not just a general person, not someone who's on camera because they're good looking. She is good looking. Not someone who's on camera because they have a great charisma and personality. Funnily enough, she actually had to build that up a while. That was where some of her roadblocks were initially. She had to get over some of those issues, polish off some of the rough edges, and now she kills it. She's actually very good in that area. Something I can admire myself, because I myself wasn't a very charismatic, outgoing guy. I had to put the same effort that I put in knowing a lot about the game, learning how to write, learning how to make videos, into learning how to convey my thoughts, how to come off in a particular manner, how to engage people, how to draw them in, how whether they like you or not, they have to listen to you, they have to hear what you say. She's done that. And by the way, like I said before, she hasn't done it all at all based on looks and feminine charm. If anything, that's something that she came along. She legitimately, by the way, actually has established a style that isn't even based around like, hey, I'm a good looking woman, or like, hi guys, don't I look great today? No, funnily enough, because of her personality and who she is, she's actually done it in a way where it's like, she even competed in terms of like looks and fashion and how slick she is and her persona on the desk. She went head to head with the men. Now, you don't have to do that. If you're a very feminine woman, if you're a very girly woman, feel free to do you. You do it your way, make it to the top your own way, like Froscorin did. That's the point there. She made it to the top due to her hard work and how good she is at the job. I'd like to see an article that didn't focus on narratives of inclusion or diversity or are women abused. I'd just like to see an article that said, what a fucking amazing commentator this person is. Woman, she's one of the best in the world, if you indeed believe that's the way it should be categorized. How about do an article, Emily Rand, best journalist of the year. You don't have to bring up that she's a woman. It's actually irrelevant to her particular job in this case. It's how good she is at the job that's amazing, not the fact that she's able to do it while being a particular sex or gender. That's a ridiculous concept. So there are absolutely amazing women out there in esports. And one of the wonderful things about being able to point that out is, first of all, it destroys a lot of these narratives. But even worse, it shows the hypocrisy of these journalists who come in claiming the premise that I'm all about empowering women and I just want women to have a chance to succeed and I want to like battle back against all the hardships of the world, and then they ignore all these aspects, or they take them and they skew it 180 the other way to fit their side. Remember, there was a hit piece about me that implied that Pansy, a pretty good commentator herself, someone who's a very old school person, Froscorin and Shocks had all made it due to implementation of like diversity programs and stuff, even though they'd all made it years before, and this person actually was being incredibly sexist by even implying that, because their implication was they only made it because we implemented these things where you said you had to hire a certain number of women. Nah, all the people I just mentioned made it because of how good they were, because of how hard they worked to improve, how hard they worked to get their material to be palatable to an audience, to get someone to want to pay them, to get the status that they've gotten, that they earned, that they took. This video was kindly supported by Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Landon Thompson, NateDOhDoubleG, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, James Harding, Daniel Yordanov, VeXii, Robert Baxter, and a special thanks goes out as always to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Would you fancy a few teasers for what's coming up in my content? How about taking part in an esports discussion with me? We'll put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.